The Utah Utes are set to take on the San Diego State Aztecs this Saturday at Rice-Eccles Stadium. But who on Utah is in for a big night? We're talking about it on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms. My name is JT Wistrcill, former student intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. On today's show, we're going to be going over which Utes are in for a big game on the offensive and defensive side of the ball as they're set to take on San Diego State, a team that beat them a year ago. And in order to help us do that, we're going to bring on friend of the show, Cole Bagley. And Cole, just jumping into it first, looking at Utah's offense versus San Diego State's defense, I really think Cam Rising's in for a big game. Personally, I think it's been a very up and down season so far for Cam through two games. You look at the Florida game, there were still a lot of good things, but whether it be the receivers or Cam himself, there were still some miscommunications. Guys weren't on the same page, inaccurate throws. Of course, the interception to end the game despite how good of a job he did to lead the team down the field in the final 2 minutes of that drive. At the end, he still didn't he made the play that ended up costing them the game. And then you look at it as well versus Southern Utah, and there were still, especially early on, a couple missed throws by him, a couple inaccurate reads. So even though the second quarter, outstanding for the most part, the first quarter especially just wasn't the start you wanted, and a lot of that did fall on Cam to me. So I think this is the game he's going to come in. I think he's going to have 4 touchdown passes in this one. I think we'll see Dalton and Brant get a couple, might see Devon finally get in the end zone. I don't see this being the game the receivers break out, but I do feel like Cam Rising's best game of the season so far will come against the team that kind of launched the legend that has become Bad Moon Rising back in 2021.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at what kind of both teams have done going into this matchup, San Diego State cannot stop the passing game whatsoever. They played Arizona in their first game. I think they allowed a little over 300 yards passing. They played and they lost in that game. I think it was 38-20. As for this last week, they played an inferior opponent in Idaho State, but they still almost allowed 300 yards. Only one touchdown, but almost 300 yards against an Idaho State offense. So, yeah, I mean, this game should have Cam written all over it. I mean, I agree with you. I think he's going to go for 400 yards on Saturday, just given the fact that San Diego State's secondary is not good. You've obviously got the tight ends of Brant Kuithe and Dalton Kincaid that have both had one really good game each. Against Florida, it was all about Brant. Against SU, it was all about Dalton, and that was only in one half, right? I mean, Dalton had 107 yards at the half. I had to do a double take. I mean, I remember getting into halftime, and I'm writing a story, and I look at occasionally the stats are wrong, and I'm just like, really? Dalton has 107 yards? And I asked a couple people around me, and they're like, yeah, pretty sure he does. And as a matter of fact, he did. I think he had 6 receptions, 107 yards, and so. Yeah, I mean, the tight ends are going to have one of them, or maybe even both, are going to have a day. I would expect at least one of them to probably go for another 100 yards. Maybe another one goes for 50 plus. I really hope that this is the game that the receivers break out. To be honest, I just think this is the perfect opportunity. This is a decent opponent that has a really bad secondary, and there's no reason not to use the receivers. There's no reason to not show them some love. Yeah, whoever's open, you want to pass them the ball, and if that's the tight end, by all means, pass it to them. Don't force it somewhere that's not going to end up and result in positive yardage. But by all means, use the wide receivers. They are begging to be used. They're putting in the work. They deserve to be utilized, and this is the perfect game to do it. You're going in against a decent, Mountain West Conference opponent. But at the same time, you should win this game pretty handily, and why not take this as an opportunity before you go into Pac-12 play to give your receivers some confidence, to let them know, hey, you guys are still, a valued group on this team. We're not just going to use the tight ends every single game. Obviously, they're going to be the focal point. That's something that Kyle Whittingham has said, and it does make sense. They're really hard to defend. They're really talented. You can count and rely on them, but the wide receivers need some love, and I'm really hoping that this week you utilize them. Why not? San Diego State has a terrible, terrible secondary and cannot stop the passing game. Why not spread the love and make your offense a little more versatile?
Yeah, so Jaden DeLaura, Arizona's quarterback, went for 299 yards, 4 touchdowns versus San Diego State. You had 3 receivers go over 50 yards, actually, and Jacob Coing for the Wildcats at 152. So this is a perfect game for Utah's receivers to go off. And look, we're not gonna waste any time on the run game. Utah's going to be able to run the ball. They've run the ball against better opponents, that being Florida. They're gonna have success. Tavion's gonna have a good game, and we'll see who else. It'll be interesting to see who gets the carries, as that's been a big thing so far in the season. But either way, expect the ground game to get going. But you're talking about the biggest thing with this Utah offense so far. It has been the receivers. We were sold on this offense being more explosive. And, the first game they kind of talked about, the looks Florida gave us just didn't really allow it. And in some ways that's true, I feel like. But at other times as well, I still just don't know how much this offense wants to and likes to take those deep shots. We saw it a little bit more the previous week, but it has been kind of interesting to see the wide receivers' lack of involvement. We heard Devon Bailey was Cam's favorite target coming into this year, and it's still clearly been Brant Kuithe and Dalton Kincaid. I thought, especially last week, looked like Cam really felt comfortable with Dalton, and the week before that, obviously, it was Kuithe. So it is interesting to see if they do break out this week. But when it comes to why it's been a slow breakout to me, it's a little bit of both. I do think at times the wide receivers have struggled to create separation. Coaches have talked about those guys demanding the ball as well, but as I mentioned, I do think there's been some struggles on Cam's part too. When guys do break open, whether it's just inaccuracy or just he's making the wrong reads and not seeing those guys, I really feel like it falls on those guys, Kuithe, that being Cam, and then the receivers themselves. They're both at fault for why it's been a slow start to the season for that connection.
Yeah, and I've also heard a couple of things that they've had the game plans to utilize the wide receivers, but then they're not executing during the game. And if you look back at SUU, first of all, Solomon Enos didn't have a single target. That's ridiculous. Second, I believe there were 1 or 2 passes in the direction of Devon Bailey that were just not catchable. One of them sailed over his head, and another one was, down towards his feet.
Yeah.
It's weird to me. Like, the passes to the tight ends are very intentional, and they're right on the spot. With the wide receivers, they're either not getting targeted, or when they are, I don't feel like they're great passes. There was even a pass or two in the Florida game to a wide receiver where I was like, what are you doing with that? Why are you missing, this receiver that's so clearly open? And, kind of going back to, I just think I think it's a perfect storm. I think that, the tight ends are just reliable, very talented. They're going to go high off, be 2 of the highest tight ends taken off the board in next year's NFL draft. They're proven. They had great years last year, and I think they're kind of Cam's comfort zone. He knows that he can rely on them. Whereas the wide receivers, we had a pretty significant overhaul. They lost Britton Covey. You had a guy like Theo Howard that was pretty reliable, really experienced. Devon Bailey broke out last season. Solomon Enos somewhat struggled last year. And so I think it's just this perfect storm of tight ends are reliable. They're open. You're going to hit them. The wide receivers are kind of still, I think, proving themselves. They proved themselves in the offseason, but it's one thing to prove yourself in the offseason and prove yourself in season. I just hope they're given the opportunity, because I do think guys like Devon Bailey and Solomon Enos and Money Parks can be solid contributors, especially Devon Bailey. I just think given his abilities, his catch radius, his athleticism, he needs to be utilized more. And it helps all around. Again, like I said earlier, if a tight end is open, pass the tight end the ball. You're going to use your strengths to your advantage each and every game. But like we saw against Florida, when you're in a situation where you really need to score, you really need a first down, you really need a touchdown like they did on that last drive, why are you forcing it to the tight ends? That's my biggest issue here, is not, let's just pass it around to give everybody some love. It's, why not be more versatile? Why not diversify this offense? Because I've looked at that tape probably 10 or 15 times. It was never, ever going to go to a wide receiver, ever. Devon Bailey was a decoy. Solomon Enos, I think, was somewhat of a decoy. But it's like he never even looked in their direction. Even when they lined up in that set, there was 5 defenders on that side. You had trips left. You had a receiver and 2 tight ends. There were 5 Florida defenders waiting to defend that side of the ball, and it worked. They baited Cam. That's just the issue here. Is it's like, you don't need to necessarily make everybody feel good, but you need to be diverse and be willing to utilize your every single offensive weapon that you have. That's my biggest thing.
Yeah, that's what being a complete offense is taking advantage of the sum of its parts. And that's something Utah has not done to this point. They're close to doing it. Tight ends, running backs, very productive. Just got to include those receivers, and it's a great opportunity for Utah to do so on Saturday. We're going to shift over and look at the Utah defense in a second. But first, I want to tell you guys about BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your pro and college football betting needs and sports info this season. Guys, how great was last weekend? Had college football on Saturday, NFL on Sunday. Just felt right to be sitting back on the couch watching all the great action play out. Make sure you guys head over to BetOnline to get into that action for all the latest football league developments, game matchups, news, podcasts, and of course betting. BetOnline has you covered. Even as things for live betting, esports, scores, MLB, of course, underway, MMA, boxing, golf, pretty much if it's a sport and you guys want to bet on it, BetOnline has you covered. Make sure you guys head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. And sticking with BetOnline as well, Cole, the line for this game is San Diego State at Utah -21. And personally, I feel really good about Utah for that line.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I mean, if Arizona can beat them by 18, there's no reason that Utah can't win by 3 to 4 possessions. I'm really hoping we see something like 45-21, or 45-17. Like, Utah should take care of business. If this Utah team is who we think they are, this should be a fairly easy game. And that's what we thought last season. Going in Utah, San Diego State, that's what I thought was going to happen last year, and it just didn't. However, it's vastly different. You do have Rising for a full game now instead of just, the fourth quarter. But we'll see what happens. But yeah, I mean, I'm thinking a three possessions minimum is my expectation.
Yeah, and as we mentioned a little bit, like we didn't really touch on the run game because we know Utah's going to be able to run the ball. So this team has a clear identity, running the ball, then get Cam going off play action. Are they maybe going to try to force a few to the receivers to try to get that connection working? Possibly, but at the end of the day, I just think there's too much talent. And if that Arizona defense can hold the San Diego State offense in check, I expect the Utes to be able to do so. The thing I am intrigued by this matchup when it comes to Utah's defense versus San Diego State's offense is the running game, because this is a San Diego State team that has traditionally been a more running team, and where the success has come has been more on the ground this season. And I think it's a nice step up for Utah, with obviously Southern Utah didn't have the personnel to be able to test this Utah run defense after they got honestly just smoked versus Florida. Florida got whatever they wanted on them, especially on the ground. I mean, through the air a little bit as well, but just so many of those big runs for first downs were hard to watch. So this is a nice step up from Southern Utah to see if they can continue to progress. So I'm excited to see if guys like Junior Tafuna, I thought was outstanding on Saturday, Van Fillinger, if he can bring some of that pressure off the edge, and especially in the run game. I'm very interested to see how guys like Lander Barton, Karene Reed, and Mo Diabate go out there and tackle, because we know they struggled with that versus Florida. It was a nice bounce back game versus Southern Utah, but once again, just that step up. So I'm excited to see what the front seven is going to do here.
Yeah. San Diego State's offense goes through the ground. That's it. I think they had 380 yards against Idaho State last week. A little over 200, or maybe just under 200 against Arizona. I know that. Sorry, so 380 against Idaho State. I think it was 170. Yeah, so a decent amount of yards in both areas. So I think if Utah can hold San Diego State to around 200 or less on the ground, this really shouldn't be much of a contest. And yeah, I agree with you. It'll be interesting to see how guys like Lander Barton respond, Karene Reed. I know Diabate left the game on Saturday with an injury.
Sure.
There hasn't been an update. So I'm not confirming or denying if he's going to play. We'll see. Hopefully he does. But even if he doesn't, that linebacker group is really deep. I hope to see, and regardless if he does play or not, I hope to see Justin Medlock get a few reps, and maybe some of the deeper guys. I'm sure we'll see, maybe a few reps with Andrew Mataafa, Hayden Fury. But I really hope to see Justin Medlock this coming week. So it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see. But yes, defensively, it's going to come down to how good is Utah's run defense actually? Because you can say, oh yeah, it was much better last week, but it wasn't really like they had to try to be that much better last week. This week they are going, that will be, I think, really the only challenge is stopping the run game.
100%. And you mentioned too, like guys, like I am excited to see Andrew Mataafa, Hayden Fury, and hopefully Medlock does get a little bit of run because this linebacker group has a lot of talent. They just don't have all that experience. Unfortunately, that's been kind of a negative thing for this team. And one of the other things as well when talking about this Utah team is the secondary has been outstanding so far this year. I do think, look, they gave a couple yards to Florida, but still held Richardson under 200 yards passing. And then going off that too, you look at how they were versus Southern Utah. There was nothing to be had there versus the air. And Burmeister, the quarterback for San Diego State, he's the guy who comes over from Virginia Tech. So this was a team that was expected to have a little bit more success through the air. But like you mentioned, they stayed on the ground. And I don't expect them to test this Utah group because we saw last week RJ Hubert took one to the house. I honestly think Utah's going to get 2 interceptions in this game. They won't be able to establish the run for me. So that will force them to press on third downs, especially as they'll be trailing. And I think because of that, we're going to see this Utah team capitalize on a couple of interceptions.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're going to see, later in the game, some situations where San Diego State's like, well, let's just, let's try a pass or two, and it's just not going to go well. Some people have said, oh, the secondary hasn't really done anything. It's like, well, they haven't really had the opportunity to do it. Florida didn't really test the secondary. SEU didn't even think twice about testing the secondary. So they're doing their jobs by simply just their presence.
Yeah.
I really don't think anybody's going to significantly try to attack Utah through the air until we get to like USC and Oregon. I think those are the teams that Caleb Williams, Bo Nix. Those are the teams that I think they're stronger in the pass game. So that's who's going to really test. But I think through the majority of the season, Utah secondary is just going to stand back there and be present and do their job, and no one's going to really test it. So this Utah defense, this Utah run defense line, the linemen, the linebackers, they're going to have their hands full, I think, most weeks, just because nobody wants to throw it back there. You got Clark Phillips, JT Broughton, Cole Bishop, RJ Hubert, who's having an awesome comeback season. Like, There's no point to try and attack Utah through the air.
No, 100%. It's been Clark Phillips said going into the year, he thinks we have the best thinks this group is the best secondary in the Pac-12. They've looked like it through their first few games, honestly, and it's another fun opportunity for them here, especially to add to that interception total on the year. But Cole, before we move into our final topic, I want to get your prediction for this game. So for me, I think this is going to be a strong performance for Utah. You kind of threw out some of those numbers earlier. I think Utah is going to get a win 44-13.
Yeah, I'm going to go with 45-17. Mm-hmm. I think San Diego State will push their way into the end zone a few times, and then have to settle for a field goal. But I think Utah is I think they're going to score on a vast majority of their drives. At least that's what the expectation should be.
Yeah, I think that should be the expectation. We expect this team to move the ball, Cam Rising to have a complete game, and the defense to really shore up. And once again, I would love to see another performance by this Utah run defense where they hold the Aztecs under 100 yards rushing, and it'll be fun to see if they're capable of doing that. One of the other things that's going to be fun to see with this Utah team is just how the rest of the season looks going forward, because Cole, one of the things that's really interesting to me about this Utah schedule going forward is ever since the Florida game, and look, the Florida game very well could be the toughest game this team plays all season. But if you look after the Florida game, I talked about this a little bit yesterday, but you go from Southern Utah to San Diego State to Arizona State to Oregon State to UCLA to USC. I really think that's a steady climb, and that's not even including the game after that is Washington State, who just had a monumental upset versus Wisconsin going into Camp Randall and getting that monster win. So I really like the way that Utah's schedule is set up for them going forward, and I really feel like it's a great opportunity for this team they had the loss that motivated them after Florida, and you can tell talking to the guys. I'm curious to see if you felt the same thing, but at least the players I talked to this week still sounded like a little bit of that chip on the shoulder is there, because they feel like that was a game they should have won versus Florida, and they know they didn't. So it's not one of those things like they feel like they need the validation for people to rank them inside the top 10. They just know that they belong amongst the best teams, and they're not viewed like that right now. So they want to go out there and earn their respect. And based on that schedule, with the opponents getting steadily better each week, I think they have a great opportunity to do so going forward.
Yeah, I mean, you obviously hope to win every single game that you're involved in, but that's tough. Undefeated seasons are few and far between. And, when you look back at last season, those losses, while you wish they were wins, really helped motivate Utah to win the pack. They knew that they were better and they used them as motivation. And I really think that like you said, I would agree. Utah is using that loss against Florida as motivation. I've had several conversations with guys that have said that very thing. I had a conversation with Gabe Reed the other day, and I just asked him. I said, "What did you guys learn from Florida?" I didn't say, oh, how tough was the loss, and like I just said, "What did you learn from that game?" And unprompted, he said, "The feeling that we had after the Florida game was a wake up call." He said, "We have such a great team, so many weapons, but if we don't perform to the best of our abilities, we're not going to have the season that we want." And sometimes, if you're going to lose, at least learn from it, right? There's teams that lose and they don't really learn the things that they need to. But I think what's really great about Utah, and they've demonstrated this, especially with the leadership that they have now, they will learn from any game that they lose. And I don't think it's going to be very many. I see this Utah team maybe losing one more game through the remainder of the year. I think USC is going to be a great test. Washington State is kind of a trap game. They're looking really good this year. UCLA is going to be tough, but like you were saying, the schedule is really, really great because obviously you came out and you kind of had a really strong test up front. You wish you would have won that game, but at least you recognize we should have won that game, and this is how good we are, and this is what we need to do to win games moving forward. Then you build on SUU, absolutely horrible team, and you're able to fix a few things and get some confidence in some other guys. San Diego State, kind of a step up from SUU, another opportunity. Let's get these receivers involved. Let's get confidence. Let's have confidence at all-time high right before we go into Pac-12 play. You start off with somewhat. I don't think Arizona State's bad. I think they could surprise the Utes, but middle of the pack team there with Arizona State, and you continue to build and build. You go from really, really good team to two not so great teams to mediocre teams, and you just build as the season goes on, and that's just going to help. You're going to build every single week, and if you're getting those victories, it's just going to help you so that when you get to the end of the season and you're hoping to repeat as Pac-12 champions, you have built every single game and gotten better every single game.
And if this team does not lose another game, now obviously there's still variables that happen in other conferences. This team is still liable to get into the college football playoff. I think that's what a lot of people had them written off after the Florida game. But that's the advantage of losing early in the season is over the course of the season, you're a vastly different team from week 1 till week 12 or conference champion week. So if you look at a team and they lose in conference champion week, you're like, oh, we know that's who it is. Versus you look at this Utah team, you're like, well, look at how many missed tackles they had. They still didn't know a couple who was their guys at certain positions. It's a vastly different team you're putting in the playoffs. So I think if this Utah team does go out there and take care of business, they could still very much do so. Now, they will need some help, obviously. There's a couple of teams they have to lose still, but this team is still really set up for success, even in the postseason to me.
Yeah, and I like the build because it gives you an opportunity to test your depth because it's inevitable. You're going to have to call on somebody at some position at some point in the season.
And the Utes looked outstanding last week.
Yeah, absolutely. I wrote about it in an article. I said, Utah put in their twos, and the slaughter just continued. There was no drop off. They just continued to just absolutely annihilate SU. Now it is SU, but I'm hoping that this week, to see maybe a series or two from those twos towards the end of this game. I really hope that Utah puts themselves in a position to continue to do that. All right, let's get Jalen Glover back out here, in another series. Let's get Bryson Barnes back out here. Let's get, some of the young defenders. Let's get Justin Medlock. Let's get Chase Kennedy, Sione Vaki. Let's get that secondary offensive line because at some point somebody's going to go down. And secondary guys are what really helped fuel this Utah team through the end of last season, especially in the secondary. Obviously, it kind of all fell apart against Ohio State. You lost even more guys. Yeah, injuries are just terrible. You lost Fabian Marks and Zemiah Vaughn. Your two deep guys late in the season, and that just put you in a bad spot. But no, it's awesome. This schedule is perfect to help Utah get to where they want to be. And I would way rather lose in week 1 to Florida than lose week 8 or week 9 or for heaven's sakes week 10 or 11 against Oregon or whenever they play. I would way rather lose in week 1 because then you know what you need to do. When you lose late, we've seen that in 2019. Utah lost late in the season. They lost in that Pac-12 championship game. and it busted it. It was over. You know, if they would have won that Pac-12 championship game, they'd make the college football playoff that year.
100%. Mm-hmm.
Instead, they lose late. They drop. What do they play? The Alamo Bowl, and
Yeah. Everyone just, we don't talk about that. It's like we don't talk about we don't talk about the Alamo Bowl. That's what that is.
But I'm just, yeah, the schedule's awesome. It just sets them up to work and to build every week, and to, they're just every week they're going to face an opponent that's a little bit better, and a little bit more dynamic, and that's just going to help you moving forward.
It is. It sets this team up for success moving forward. It's a great opportunity. And you mentioned it as well. Like, yes, it was Southern Utah, even when the twos and threes got in. But what are you supposed to do against them? You're supposed to dominate. And that's exactly what they did. So you can only take it as an encouraging step for this team. And hopefully those guys get more opportunities on Saturday. But Cole, what are some of the things you're working on right now with FanNation AllUtes?
Yeah, we're just continuing to provide coverage. Each and every day we're up there, media availability twice a week. We're up there in the press box on Saturdays. In addition to we put out a podcast with Jalen Glover this week about what it was like for him to get on the field for the first time and to score his first Utah touchdown. That was just a lot of fun to sit back and to listen to that. So if anybody's interested in hearing directly from Jalen, him describe the whole experience, not only beforehand, what it was like to go to Florida, and then as well getting on the field, finding the end zone not once but twice. You guys can check that out at the All Aboard the J Train FanNation podcast, available on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon. Again, All Aboard the J Train. That's Jalen Glover's exclusive podcast. So it's just been fun. Those are kind of the things that we've been working on, is each and every week, depending on, who has a big performance and whatnot, we're able to pull these guys and hear it straight from them, what it was like. And that's just been really, really fun.
That's Cole Bagley. Make sure you guys go over and follow him on Twitter at Bagley_Cole, and check out FanNation AllUtes as well. If you guys are in the market for a second listen every day, we recommend you check out the Locked On Pac-12 podcast, where hosts Spencer McLaughlin and local Pac-12 experts will take you around the conference in under 30 minutes. Lots of game recaps from last Saturday's action, as well as, of course, now that we're on to Thursday, a lot of upcoming matchups this coming weekend, which would be another fun week of Pac-12 football. So thank you guys, as always, for tuning in to Locked On Utes, making us your first listen every single day. Make sure you guys head over and follow the channel at Locked On Utes on Twitter, and we will see you guys tomorrow.